So this, as I alluded to, ministers weighing up giving workers a week off work to mourn distant relatives. Think in-laws, cousins, uncles, nieces, an entire week off. I mean, how do you gauge that? This is Keir Starmer's new workers' rights bill with chosen family covered for bereavement leave. And let's get a word from Joanna Marchong, Head of Communications and External Affairs, the Adam Smith Institute. Joanna, nice to have you with us. I mean, it's one of those kind of odd subjects that you can kind of have a bit of fun with in a curious way, because you go, well, what if your budgie dies? You know, if your hamster dies? You know, I was close to my little hamster when Susie fell off her climbing frame. I can't tell you how devastated I was as a 7-year-old. Didn't get any time off school, though, which frankly was abuse. But that's another story. Never got over it. But there's a very serious issue to this. There's also a serious economic issue to this one.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
This story, so far, everyone's been talking about compassion because it is a really tricky subject. But what the government is now kind of questioning / wanting to do is expand all these rules regarding bereavement leave, and they're opening it up to the public. So right now we have really strict laws, which, by the way, companies will be able to enforce their own, but from a government statutory basis, you only get bereavement leave if you've lost a child under 18 years old and you have a week off. Right now, we're talking about how long can someone take off, who qualifies under you know, you're allowed to take this leave. So in the consultation, it actually says close friends and relationships that are not related, but take the place of traditional relationships. So that could be close friends, I mean, like whoever you know. And as you know, with a lot of these policies that Labour are looking at in the Workers' Rights Bill, you can just see the door opening for it to be abused and being taken advantage of.
And that's the problem, isn't it? I don't know whether, I mean, you know, when you get given a job and you get hired for a new job, are you going to have to sort of nominate who your kind of chosen family are? I understand it. You know, some kids are raised by their grandparents for various reasons, stuff like that. Of course, I understand that. But are you able to say, you know, my distant cousin Mabel, who lives in, you know, I don't know, Cape Town or Kathmandu, wherever, you've never met in your life, are you allowed to put Mabel down as, you know, your chosen family and cop a week off work?
Well, you're saying it completely correct. Like, what we're now wondering is how much sway businesses will be able to have to assess the situation for themselves. So we don't know how long these people will be able to take off. We don't know what documents of proof we'll need, like what kind of evidence. Does a photo of me and the same person with this room work? Can we, like, how much can they claim? Will it be paid, unpaid? So government doesn't allow you to take it paid, or they don't force businesses to pay you. But workers and businesses already have policies in place where you can qualify for paid bereavement leave. So if you're working at a company and you know their terms are flexible, why wouldn't you have a paid week off just because, I don't know, you can have it?
If it's a pay, yeah. And would this just be in the public sector? I mean, what would they compel the private sector? And this is where, you know, you can hear the kind of almost the haunting chants of Angela Rayner over your shoulder, who has sort of a curious idea of what workers' rights and relationships with bosses should be. You know, bosses bad, workers good, all the time, all of that. And there is that sort of sense that it will become, you know, mandatory. So not only would employers be dealing with national insurance hikes, business rates going through the roof, minimum wage increasing, they now might have to give somebody about a month off work over the course of a year if you lost 4 very distant relatives.
Yeah, exactly. Also, talking about the workers' rights bill, that is riddled with issues and businesses are scared. And what you can't really put a price on is the level of uncertainty that businesses are actually feeling, because the consequences of that are seeping through into so many different spheres of our economy.
Yeah.
I mean, the government's already admitted that the bill itself could potentially cost businesses up to £5 billion a year.
Wow.
So that's the hit that we're looking at. I mean, earlier this year, we saw businesses band together for one of the very first times and say we all have issues with specific parts of this bill. There needs to be serious amendments or so many of it scrapped.
Is there is there a way of gauging? You know, some people might have and you know, sort of just away from the economics of this, just the sort of a general human side, Joanna, it's quite difficult, isn't it, you know, you can't have a one-size-fits-all policy. You can't say, right, OK, for an aunt it's 3 days, for a parent it's 2 weeks, for a sibling it's one. I mean, there's no... How do you judge that? I mean, some people's lives completely fall apart when somebody dies. They could be off work for a year with, you know, severe trauma, depending on the circumstances, I guess, of someone's death. You know, if somebody... I don't know, if your nan's 115 and she dies, you know, I think that's almost a point of celebration, frankly, if you got to those impressive years.
Yeah, so exactly. It's so hard to regulate, and it's a very tricky scenario for a lot of people. I think what we always forget, we have this idea in the media that businesses are these evil conglomerate, massive institutions that don't care about workers. That's not true. Your employer will want you to perform at your best, to work the most efficient that you can, and at the end of the day, perform well. And obviously, someone going through grief will not be performing well, and there won't be any point to having them in the office. What happens already is that employers are allowed to use their discretion to see the situation unfold and then know what to do. You're taking away the rights and the choice from employers, and you're just kind of forcing on them, saying that this legislation has to happen.
Yeah.
And even on the flip side of that, if an employer knows someone is lying about something, they're helpless, and they have to just say fine, because it's required by law. Indeed.
Joanna, on that point, thank you very much indeed. Nice to have you on with us. Joanna Marchong, who's Head of Communications and External Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. This is a tricky one. I think if you've lost a child, then I think I would be inclined as an employer to say, you know, you literally take as much time as you need on this. And in fact, and if it's a child, then that's obviously clearly so enveloped with ultimate grief, injustice, and, you know, sadness, and, you know, life-changing disposition. Then I don't know what you're meant to do with that. When somebody's really old, I can't be the only person who's had that. You know, when you work with somebody who you think is quite old, I mean, there's people who work with me that probably think I'm quite old, but, you know, when I meet somebody who's quite old and they talk about their mum or dad, and I always think, do you have a mum or dad? You're like 90. How have you got a mum or dad? And the greatest example of that was when I was working with the late and great Mike Dickin, which many of you will remember. I mean, Mike, in my head, was sort of about 80. I think at this time he was about 70, and I was out on the balcony at the back of the old building that we used to work from, where everybody would go for a cigarette. And Mike just turned to me and went, "Yeah, a bit of a rough day, mate." And I said, "Well, what's happened?" He went, "My nan died." And I thought I must have misheard him. This is guy's older than God's teeth, right? And I said, "What?" He went, "My nan died." I said, "Your nan died?" And he went, "Yeah." And it was like she was something like 105 or something. The numbers did work out when you thought about it. Mike Dickin had a nan? I mean, this is unbelievable. It's like, you know, discovering King Charles has a great-grandmother around. I mean, it's just lunacy. But when somebody of that age passes, I think, is your mourning somewhat more, you know, is it sort of less in a way? You're going to miss the person, but there's no tragedy in the conventional sense of an illness or an accident. Someone's just lived a lot of good years, and they've done really well. And if you've lived to 105, I mean, what does families expect? You meant to live forever or something? But employers should be mindful of each individual situation. It's on that